Okay. And that translated into about 200,000 votes down. And he lost by, I think, about 110,000.
Right. I mean,
Uh,
there's
yeah.
some core Republican support, but the point is there wasn't enough to overcome the massive support from the African American community and those voters who were not committed to the Republican cause. You had many Republicans who voted for Darden or Scott Angel who did go back to vote with Vitter, but you also had a significant number who did not.
Have you looked at numbers yet in terms of the voters that did not?
Well,
Is that information available?
we will know better when the names of the actual voters are released. But what we see is that the support in the white community for John Bell Edwards was probably about 35 to 40%, closer to 40% of all white voters. You know, so clearly, many white voters who were with Scott Angel or Jay Darden did move to Vitter, but not all of them.
Now, Merritt Landry, if I recall correctly, I think the number was 18 or 19.
It was between 18 and 20%.
Okay, okay. So that's
That movement is what makes the difference.
yeah,
That movement is almost exclusively in that voter community.
yeah. I mean, that's twice the white vote.
Correct. And
I mean, that's
a comparable African American vote.
yeah, yeah, and a comparable turnout too.
Well, actually, turnout overall was lower, substantially. In Mary Landry's race in November of 2014, it was about 50%. It was about 39.5% on Saturday. What was really noteworthy on Saturday was that African Americans cast about 29% of the vote, and that is really very good. The differential in turnout, um, white voters, white and other race voters turned out at about 41. African American voters turned out about 37 and a half. So there was only about a 4 point turnout differential. And that's a significant improvement over the typical race. Very often, other than a presidential, we see about an 8 to 10% turnout differential. So it's the degree of turnout doesn't matter as much as the composition of what the voting populace looks like. And so John Bell Edwards was doing exceedingly well in the African American community and had broad support in the white community. Not a majority, but plenty enough to wind up with a 55% victory.
Yeah, yeah. You said the African American was 31%. Is that what you said? I'm sorry.
No, I said African American turnout was about 37%.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And they cast about 29.4% of all votes that were cast on Saturday.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, I mean that is high.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
Um,
If
I,
you if you look at some of the information that I provided to you earlier, there's an African American index, and that shows whether or not a precinct is predominantly white or predominantly African American in 10% increments. And if you look at that, you can see the racial pattern in the vote. And so when you have a candidate who gets 95+% of almost 30% of the votes cast, that is a great place to start.
yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, that's a 63% right there.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It's a very impressive number.
yeah, it is. Um, so, um, where, what, why did David Vitter lose?
He didn't get as many votes as John Bell.
Yeah, that's no doubt about that one.
Like
But
about
yeah,
50% of the white voters supporting him, and really over 95% of the African American voters supported him. I think John Bell was considered to be an attractive candidate to a broader spectrum of Louisiana voters.
um, so did David Vitter lose or John Bell Edwards win?
John Bell Edwards won.
I mean, technically he won, but was this a referendum on David Vitter rather than an election for John Bell Edwards? Yeah, he did. He's our next governor.
Yeah. As a,
But
you know,
was this? I'm sorry.
as a practical matter, the vote for a Democrat for governor breaks the trend of what we see in Louisiana. Okay? I don't think the state is any more Democratic today than it was last week,
Sure.
in prior elections. But of the two candidates, obviously voters had a preference for John Bell Edwards.
Right. In terms of the reasons that they didn't have the preference for David Vitter, I mean, you had, yeah.
Everybody's got their own reasons for that. I mean, everybody has different perspectives of why they support a candidate, and I think that's enough said.
Okay. Could you explain, say, the qualities that perhaps John Bell Edwards had that maybe was attractive?
Well, I think he represented a different style of leadership, and everything comes down to a choice. It's like going through a cafeteria line,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe all the food's good, but some looks better than others.
Okay. I mean, certainly, I've heard conservatives say that, and tell me directly in so many different ways that John Bell Edwards is not really a moderate. I mean, he's a liberal, and so they think there's a sort of a fraud on the people. I mean, that's something I read on a conservative blog this morning, and I mean, I don't agree with it, but
Nor do I.
okay,
Nor do
okay, and nor do the voters.
Right. Obviously not. I mean, I think when you look at the mandate that was given yesterday, it's pretty significant. I think it's a great vote of confidence for the new governor.
Yeah, is it a mandate? I mean,
technically any win is a mandate, but I mean it's a very impressive win.
well, because the reason why I raised that question is that obviously the House and the Senate are even more Republican now than they were before, and he's got and he has this mandate. So you have two mandates.
But I think that's what our system's all about. I mean, you should have checks and balances.
Yeah, as long as you get something done.
Correct. Well, there are those who believe that if you don't get anything done, the public is better off. But obviously,
Right.
in Louisiana, we have a lot to do. And I think one of the things that people felt about John Bell Edwards is that he is one who can work with people. He's part of the legislature. He wasn't obviously not seen as part of the problem.
Right. That's really interesting that he was not perceived as part of the problem.
I think a lot of people recognize that they wanted a governor who could work with the legislature. And I think in some Senator Vitter's early commercials, he indicated that he was going to get things straight. And that was not very well received, apparently.
Now, one of the polls that came out earlier was that Bobby Jindal had a 70% disapproval. That was how much of a factor do you think that was? I mean, I know there are no numbers, but
it's really hard to say. There are so many things that a voter takes into consideration in making the decision who to vote for. There's very seldom a quote silver bullet. President Obama was hung around John Bell Edwards' neck. People were trying to hang Bobby Jindal around David Vitter's neck. At the end of the day, does it make a difference? I mean, every voter makes up their own mind. And when you look at the amount of money that's spent on ads and messaging, it's really at a very small segment of the voting populace. Because what we see is that the vast majority of voters, their commitments are in place early on. Okay?
Was that right?
Oh, you clearly see that. It's highly predictable. And as a result, there were these people in the middle, and how do you move them? And so people do message testing and everything else to determine what really moves folks. There's a lot of science to campaigns today. I mean, stump speeches are great, but it goes well beyond that.
So you were tracking what 2 weeks prior to the election? You were tracking every day, I should say.
We were tracking every day prior to the primary for 4 weeks. And we were doing samples of 300 balanced perfectly demographically and geographically. Coming up to the runoff, we did 10 tracks, 2-3 weeks out, and then 4 nights, 2 weeks out, 4 nights, 1 week out. They proved to be very accurate. We tracked multiple races.
Really? That's so. I don't recall exactly what the last number was in terms of the tracking, which would have been Friday. Am I correct?
Thursday.
Oh, okay, Thursday.
The last track was Thursday evening, on that. But the 2-night track, which represented 600, had John Bell at 50, David Vitter at 40, and about 10% still undecided. And a lot of that undecided is people just don't want to commit as to who they're voting for. Because in a tracking poll, unlike other polls, the interviewer does not establish a relationship with the respondent. It's just, are you going to vote? Who are you going to vote for? And it somewhat takes some people aback. But my point is, in the last tracks, there was about a 10-point spread, which is what we saw.
Right. So obviously the undecided, I mean, that's really interesting because
broke pretty even.
Yeah. The role of, there's been a lot of discussion, obviously, the role of the recent Syrian Paris disaster, terrorists. There were, obviously people were saying, well, that's really, really going to help Vitter. Now, you were tracking every day.
That's correct.
So,
and we didn't see any movement on that to speak of. We had one night on track where there was a little blip, but if you did 2 nights, night before, night after, or the other way, it was really pretty close to the same. I think an anomaly that's routine within tracking.
That's, I think, speaking for myself, but also, people that I talk to, expected that to really have a tremendous impact.
I did too. As a matter of fact, with the Paris event on Saturday and then Monday, I expected to see within the track because it was far enough back that everybody knew about it. People had a chance to read about it. There was a lot of TV coverage on it. There was no difference in the track between the Friday prior to the incident and the Monday after the incident.
Wow.
And I was really surprised at that. And I thought, well, maybe I would see it on the Tuesday track. Did not see it on the Tuesday track either. And then, there was a little bit of an anomaly on Wednesday prior to the election, but then on Thursday, everything was right back as to where it was. So, the tracking is exceedingly important. It really helps keep you hand on the pulse, and it enables you to evaluate the commitment of resources and the like in terms of where you're vulnerable, how do you mitigate risk, and how do you leverage opportunity.
Do you have an opinion in terms of, say, what ad seemed to have the best impact? Was that measured?
I did. I'm sure the pollsters for either campaign. I was not in any way involved with the campaign of John Bell Edwards itself, and certainly not with Senator Vitter's campaign. But I'm sure their pollsters tested the impact of individual ads. That really wasn't my interest. My interest was solely identifying those voters that we could move, and where we were.
So, what voters did you feel that you could really move?
What we went after the WHOPPER group, people who voted in 2010 in the Senate race, and people who voted on October 24th. That group of votos. And then, of course, we also focused on trying to increase African American turnout because we knew that that vote was solidly in John Bel Edwards' corner. This is a great illustration because it's pretty much everything you want to know about the election in one place. You have a profile of the voters in the lower left-hand corner. You have the pie chart of who won. You have the results on a parish-by-parish basis up in the upper right-hand corner. If you scroll down just a little bit on that, you will see the percent of the voters, go up a little bit. Get the middle one right there. That's the percent that John Bel Edwards got by parish. The coloration indicates
the darker is the greater.
The darker the blue, the higher the percentage. Okay, and then the lower element, the one that's kind of green and yellow, that represents turnout. Where was turnout good? Where was turnout bad?
Right.
And then you have just larger illustrations of the map, just for helping you a little bit better understand it. If you scroll down to the PDF and you look at the African American Index, it's about the third bit of tabular data. Okay, that's my media market. That's congressional district.
Okay.
Right here. Okay, an AA1 is a precinct that has anywhere from 0 to 10% African American, going all the way up to an AA10, which is 90% to 100% African American. And what you can see here is how the candidates performed on a racial basis. One thing that's also very interesting to note, we made the comment that John Bel Edwards was at his height of popularity, or enjoyed the most support during the early voting period. And up at the top of this, you can see, just generally speaking, that John Bel got 59% of the early vote. So he performed actually better in the early vote than he did on election day.
Right. Yeah.
And so you can see, as you go down this list, what the turnout is, and you can see that from an AA1 to an AA10, the turnout spread was not that different, only about the 3 points that we talked about. Now, because we're looking at precincts individually here, you'll see the turnout number. There's no turnout associated with absentee voting, obviously, but it's aggregated into the other. So the overall turnout was 39.8. You don't see any group of precincts that has anything that high, because this is strictly election day voting that's being calculated. And when you add early voting into it, it brings it up to 39.8. But you can see in the African American community, where we had very high concentrations of African American, like an AA10, John Bel got 98% of the votes.
Wow. Yeah, what strikes me, and I know we need to close now, what strikes me is St. Bernard Parish. I mean, that St. Bernard went for John Bel Edwards, and I'm comparing that not just in terms of recent history, but David Duke race, where St. Bernard was the only parish, if I recall correctly, that I think maybe it was the Governor Edward race, and as well as the U.S. Senate race, went for David Duke.
Well, and another thing that's really incredibly noteworthy is that Jefferson Parish.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, that is really very significant.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I'm sure viewers certainly will love to go through all this and share the PDF. And please, I'd love to have you back. And we have an election coming up. A big one.